Hey friends, we live in a world where busyness and stress seem to be badges of honor. We chase success, often forgetting the rest our souls desperately need. We follow rules, sometimes missing the heart behind them. We find ourselves divided within our families, our communities, and even our own minds. But what if I told you that there's a source of peace, wisdom, and unity that can anchor your life no matter what storms you face? Today, I'd like to take a deep dive into the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 12, where Jesus speaks profound truths that offer us not just guidance, but transformation. The Lord of the Sabbath. Now, picture this. Jesus and his disciples are walking through a grain field on the Sabbath, a day traditionally set aside for rest and worship. His disciples, hungry, begin to pick the heads of grain to eat. The Pharisees and religious elites are quick to point fingers, accusing them of breaking the Sabbath law. In response, Jesus doesn't just defend his disciples, he reframes the entire conversation. He brings up the story of David. Eating consecrated bread meant only for priests when he and his men were in need. And then Jesus says something revolutionary. The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. Now, what does that mean for us? The Sabbath, rest, isn't just about following rules or rituals. It's about understanding that rest is a gift from God, meant to nourish and restore us. Jesus declares that he is the Lord of rest. He offers us true rest, not just from physical exhaustion, but from the deep weariness of carrying burdens that life throws our way. When you feel overwhelmed by the demands of work, family, or expectations, remember that Christ invites you into his life for his rest. It's not about perfectly observing rituals. It's about finding peace and restoration in him. Ask yourself, where in your life do you need this rest? Are you trying to earn it by working harder or achieving more? Jesus reminds us that true rest is found in his presence, not in our performance. Compassion over legalism. Shortly after, Jesus enters a synagogue and encounters a man with a shriveled hand. The Pharisees see this as another opportunity to trap Jesus. They ask him, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" Their question isn't born out of genuine curiosity. It's a test to see if Jesus will break the Sabbath law by performing a healing. But Jesus, as always, sees the heart of the matter. He points out their own inconsistencies, saying, "If any of you has a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, won't you take hold of it and lift it out?" In other words, they would break their own rules if it meant helping something valuable to them. So, how much more should we be willing to help a fellow human being? Good question. Jesus heals the man, demonstrating that compassion should always take precedence over rigid rules. The lesson here is powerful. Sometimes, in our desire to follow rules or fit in, we lose sight of what truly matters: love, kindness, and human dignity. Jesus challenges us to live from a place of mercy, not legalism. So, think about your own life. Are there areas where you're more focused on doing things right than on doing the right thing? Jesus calls us to lead with compassion, to prioritize people over protocol. And in a world often obsessed with appearances and correctness, let's be people who lead with love. A house divided cannot stand. The story continues with another dramatic moment. Jesus heals a man possessed by a demon who was both blind and mute. The people are astonished, But the Pharisees, unwilling to acknowledge Jesus' power, accuse him of casting out demons by the power of Satan. This accusation is absurd, and Jesus points out the illogic of their claim with a simple truth. Every kingdom divided against itself will be ruined, and every city or household divided against itself will not stand. And this principle goes beyond the Pharisees' accusation. It's a timeless truth about unity. Division, whether in a nation, a community, a family, or even within ourselves, leads to destruction. When we allow bitterness, jealousy, or pride to create division in our relationships or within our hearts, we weaken the foundation of our lives. Jesus calls us to unity. First, unity with God, and then unity with one another. Reflect on the relationships in your life. Are there divisions that need healing? Are you allowing negativity or resentment to take root? Jesus reminds us that a divided house cannot stand. Seek reconciliation, both with God and with those around you. In a world filled with division and conflict, let's be people who pursue unity and peace. The Sign of Jonah. The Pharisees, still not satisfied, asked Jesus for a sign to prove his authority. Instead of giving in to their demands, Jesus points them to the story of Jonah. Jonah, as you may remember, was swallowed by a great fish and spent 3 days in its belly before being spit out alive onto dry land. Jesus tells the Pharisees that the only sign they will receive is the sign of Jonah, foreshadowing his own death and resurrection. Here Jesus is teaching us an important lesson about faith. The Pharisees were looking for a miraculous sign, but Jesus points to something deeper. Faith doesn't always come from seeing the miraculous. It comes from trusting God's greater plan, even when we don't fully understand it. Just as Jonah's story seems hopeless, but ultimately led to salvation, so too will Jesus' death lead to the greatest victory of all, his resurrection. In our own lives, we often ask for signs. We want clear, immediate answers to our prayers. But Jesus reminds us that sometimes the answer is found in trusting God's timing and plan, even when we can't see the full picture. Just as Jonah emerged from the depths and Jesus rose from the grave, we too can trust God will bring us through the darkest of times. So, as we reflect on the lessons of the Gospel of Matthew chapter 12, we are reminded the depth of Jesus' teachings. He calls us to rest in him, to prioritize compassion over rigid rules, to seek unity in our relationships, and to trust God's plan even when we don't have all the answers. These aren't just lessons for the past. They are truths that speak directly to the struggles and challenges we face today. So, as you leave today, take these questions with you. Where do you need to let go of striving and find rest in Jesus? How can you choose compassion and kindness in your daily interactions? Are there divisions in your life that need healing? And how can you pursue unity? And finally, are you willing to trust in God's plan even when you can't see the outcome? Remember, Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath, the source of our true rest. He is the healer, the unifier, and the one who invites us into a life of peace, wisdom, and purpose. Let's go forward with hearts open to his grace, ready to extend that same grace to the world around us. Amen. Thank you. Tomorrow we'll discuss chapter 13.